Well, thank you everyone for joining me and John and Chris today for Where is Conversational AI Going? Obviously, if you have a question for us, we hope you do. Just type it in the chat window and we'll get it at the end of the session, most likely. If there's an appropriate question in the middle of our content, where maybe we're talking about some evolutionary technology and revolutionary technology, we'll go ahead and address it then. So we'll pay close attention to the chat and the QA to make sure that that we're getting you covered. So with that, I'd really like to talk about Jonathan Frostic. Jonathan is an IT delivery lead over at HSBC. This is his LinkedIn post after he had a heart attack. And really what's interesting here is kind of how we've been living our lives. We're kind of a slave to the technology. And what happened is Jonathan's getting ready for work one Sunday. Who's working on a Sunday, right? It's everyday work, 7 days a week. We're slaves to our technology and to our work schedule. So here he is, he's explaining what is actually worrying him on this Sunday evening after he had a, leading up to the heart attack. He has a heart attack. He says, this is what I'm worried about. Like, I need to meet with my manager tomorrow. This health concern really isn't convenient, right? And then how do I secure the funding for my next project? So again, he's still worried about what he has to deliver. He hasn't updated his will. Hope his wife doesn't find him dead. Some personal things too. But the first couple of points that he makes is, what about work, right? So in this human-centric model, we have all this technology available to us. He works at a large bank. He probably works on hundreds of different systems and hundreds of different applications. Yet he can't really leverage that from his current situation. So he's got a full meeting of schedule. His calendar is full of meetings, planning meetings. He has Jira. If you go ahead and move to the next slide, Chris. He's got Jira tickets. He's got sprints. He's got Gantt charts. He's got teams delivering software and releases. Like, all of this data is available to him and to his team and to the supporting internal and external customers. He has all this technology available to him, and it's not helping him at this moment. So he can't really kick off a step and say, hey, I am going to be out of the loop for some time, a week or two. I need to get my health in order. But I still have all of these items that I am responsible for. So, like, really what we want to talk about today is, given this situation, how could we make our jobs easier by leveraging technology to take care of a situation similar to this? So we're going to talk about Jonathan a couple of different times to draw it back to a personal example, but how we look at all the different systems that we interact with, how we interact with our coworkers and our peers and our teams, and how do we get stuff done with technology? So Chris, anything you want to add on here before we go to what Jonathan looks like in the hospital?
Interesting is you pointed out things are very IT centric. This picture shows just as much technology, but these people aren't IT people at all, right? So Jonathan is, hey, I'm an IT, I think of my systems. But in this picture, people actually aren't in IT, but they're talking about systems themselves, right? They're inundated with technology. So, how to order a CT scan. So what's the ICD-10 code to order that? How do I enter my ICD-10 so I can identify that this is a cardiac arrest? People and doctors and nurses went to school for specialties, right? They didn't go to become specialists in data entry and figuring out how to operate with technology. They in his world, and Jonathan's world is different. He's a technologist, so he's obviously done a lot of alt tabbing of technology. But these people, they went to school to actually care for people, to work in an emergency room, things like that. So they're being inundated with technology, and they're having to learn or being forced to adapt to the technology to figure out how to do this. So it's a huge paradigm and it's a problem, right? So if we look at the human to computer innovations over the years, so there's been tons of them. And this is an interesting Gantt chart from the Gartner Hype Cycle talking about how these things hyped up and came into be. But if you really look at the things that have happened, say in the last 7 years, conversational user interfaces, mixed reality, conversational AI platforms. So it's interesting, conversation hit it twice. Personification, that kind of falls in that same category. And then immersive workspace. Now, of course, this is the technology. This isn't the fact that we are immersed in our work because we're working from home, right? So this could have easily has been, it's like, how do you set up a desk that raises up and down at home and set up your Wi-Fi network so you can deprioritize your children, right? So immersive workspace has got a double entendre here. And that's actually the world Jonathan's living in, right? So how is AI helping your people? So it's interesting. I looked out with Scott at the marketing out there on how AI is helping people. Human agents make the best bot managers. They can oversee bot conversations and even label misunderstood interests. So now we become proofreaders. Like, I don't have a problem sleeping. I'm sure if you have insomnia and you want to go read 4,000 responses a bot had to find the ones you should correct, doesn't sound like AI is helping me. Our human understanding AI engine is intuitive, that it is continually learning what customers want over time and replace virtually every agent in your call center. I'm not signing up for Terminator or Battlestar Galactica here. Come on, people. That is not something you actually want to sell to people that, hey, help us implement this so you don't have a job. Let's talk about coexisting with technology, right? And then this is the best one. We're democratizing bot building. Business people should be able to do this. Everyone is a bot builder using APIs. Just pick the one. http://10.159.249.70 on port 80.189/ and it's probably some horrible get string. And don't worry about this JSON body. Just pick what you think is right. This is not helping either, right? So marketing hype is huge about, hey, AI and ML are going to take over the world. They're going to really help. But in reality, let's look at the most advanced AI we've actually thought about. So data on Star Trek. And you think you can do all of that? Dream on, buddy. So obviously this is the moment when he actually had an emotion chip put in, but really the hype is way out there in the marketing. So what is AI, conversational AI happening? Where are we going from? So let's break it down. Collaboration platforms started early with email, then we went to WhatsApp, we went to Slack, to Teams. So this space has evolved from, say, one-to-one communications to actually kind of broadcasting of messages, right? And there's lots of flavors and new form factors. Well, in reality, it was very good. It created time-based documentation of events and activities. Everybody can go look in their email and say, when did that happen? Did I respond, right? And then we got to more conversational things where we had platforms like Slack, where we can say, okay, instead of me emailing 100 people and filling an inbox, let me put it on a channel in Slack so people can see what's happening. And so this allowed email volumes to come down a bit, and we have now repositories that are shared across multiple people, so we can go search those things in the background. But the problem is, the more people who join that, the more messages you get. So you basically get a fire hose of messages to these extremely large groups, and people become disinterested and fatigued over time. They don't actually go into the Slack channels every morning, see what happened yesterday, what happened last week. There's just too much information. And really, managers are figuring it out. Do we really need our most skilled employees and specialty resources to read 4,000 messages a day to determine, is there an action item I should have? Is this message meant for me, or is this just generic for the entire department or my team? How does that work? And structured decisions don't actually exist. Everything requires manual intervention. You can put something out on Slack, like an all call, I need help, but then where does it go? How do you get the help? Well, it doesn't happen in that tool. So the collaboration platforms evolved, but they haven't necessarily gotten us to a good collaboration itself on people to people. It's more like notifications themselves.
Yeah, and Chris, this is John, guys. Hi. I think what's interesting here is we, instead of getting more sophisticated about knowing who to provide what information to when they need it, or provide people with the ability to go reach out to others in a structured way or out to other information when they need it. We've used the fire hose approach. We've said, okay, dump everything to everyone, and then we'll see if they can, well, basically make it their responsibility to find what they need when they need it. That's created way too much of an information overload. It's actually, and it's not a product like Slack's fault. It's just an abuse of the capability that instead of being more refined about how we provide information to people as they need it, we're basically dumping it all and saying, you got to sort through it all to find what you need. I find that very unappealing, right? At the very least, as a guy who runs a development team, and this is one of my responsibilities here, to see hundreds of Slack messages every few hours in a channel means my developers don't have their hands in our code. They're just staring at other people's messages. Drives me insane.
Yep. So if we look at chatbots, so chatbots are really cool. And when you think about conversational AI, that's usually the first thing you think of. So, and Eliza's here because really in the 60s is when the first concept of can we parse sentences and based on a statement, return with a question in that. And then the interesting thing is like, Cleverbot was the first one to kind of got, let's learn based on previous conversations what we should do next. And then Masuku, Rosen, and Zhao, their additions are really interesting. It was really about the personification of the bot itself. Can the bot determine the sentiment of the person? Is the person speaking to me with hostility? Are they happy? Are they sad? And then when they reply back, they want to reply back in the most human way possible, right? So Masuku is traditionally the winner of the Turing Award because they can actually say, can you eat a house? No, it's made of bricks. So there's some intelligence there. And so they want to have a reasonable conversation. Rose and Zhao really wanted to personalize the responses back. So if you think about all this history, none of it was really around getting data and systems and interesting data to the chatbot to return to you until Microsoft started. And the idea was it's basically Google on steroids. They can consume lots of information and figure out, are these FAQs? Can we reference things in that? But chatbots really haven't evolved to having, intelligence, I would say. It's more, I've seen it, I can play it back. So they do simulate human-based emotional responses, and things have gotten very good at that. We've reduced the overall call centers and volumes of those. Most people can get pointed to an FAQ or get pointed in the right direction on a website based on some questions. It's basically intelligent mapping your FAQs, but none of them are really good at real-time data lookups and systems of record. A lot of them are very hard-coded. I've learned a batch of questions and responses. I now can reply with those. And the only way to add new things is to add them to the learning base. It's not a real-time lookup. And communications tend to be one to none, a human to the bot, or when you get fed up and it doesn't work, you transfer here. Let me transfer it to an agent. And then it's the opposite. You've got one agent in the call center and they've got 20 conversations they're trying to manage and say, okay, what does this person need? What does this person need? And so they're actually filling in all the gaps. And that's not optimal. It's probably very stressful, quite honestly. And then they tend to be stateless. So every time you come back to something, you don't remember where you left off. So every time it's like, okay, this is my product, this is my question, this is where I live. You have to retell things. So when we see these on websites, in many cases, what they're doing is they're trying to gather some information. They're going to hand you off to a human, or they just want to get your email address and your phone number and your name and some interest so they can put you on a mailing list. But they're not really chatting and giving you real-time information, which in reality, conversational AI should have that artificial intelligence, but actually have those links to real-time systems itself also.
Yeah, chatbots really, especially if you, think about them now, I find most chatbots very unappealing. At least the way that most people have implemented them. It's not the technology necessarily, although, as Chris, you say, the tech is it doesn't provide any kind of integration solution in the back end. It's all hand code that, right? So chatbot development is very difficult. And in reality, it's sort of an admission that we've built this website way too complicated for people to find what they need. So let's put a chatbot on top of that so that hopefully that'll work. But that at least is a bit of insight, isn't it? This thing is so hard for us to navigate So why don't we just let people converse with us, and they'll probably be able to get it. There's at least an insight there in what chatbots are doing that I think we want to take with us. But yeah, we certainly don't want these limitations.
Yeah. So the other thing is, this is so near and dear to my heart, is system integration platforms. Because let's face it, mainframes came out, client server technologies, then we moved to the web, SOA, APIs, and mobile. And we've done a ton of stuff to make it easier to get data between systems, whether it was data replication or real-time lookups and to cross-reference data. But it was all very core to computer to communications. And the reason it evolved is because our computers evolved, right? You know, a mainframe to mainframe communicated quite well in 1960, but then you expect how a mobile device would contact a mobile device without the internet and the web. So all of the advancements here has not been in the concept of a need to move data. Granted, a copybook versus XML is self-describing, but it's because the technology changed. You know, Unix systems, cloud systems, mobile devices. So they're really, really good. And they did revolutionize B2B communications. I mean, I can remember in 2003 when Walmart said, you're going to send all your orders to me electronically over the internet. Well, they were doing it on paper. So they took traditional paper processes and made them digital, but sent them over the internet. It was changing and computing that changed that. It's really did solve for data replication and system of record. You could easily replicate data into multiple systems, or you could do a real-time lookup and cross-reference something in a system. But notice, I keep saying systems and hardware. There was no human interaction in these workflows. It was strictly, how do I get data between two systems that are happening? Human workflows were very difficult, if not impossible, with message-oriented middleware and EAI and pub-sub models, right? And then in those days, data validation was really hard-coded in most reality, or the ML takes terabytes to learn how to train a model. I mean, I've heard a friend of mine in a cybersecurity company said, yeah, once we got to 8 terabytes of data, we started getting answers. We got to 10, 12 terabytes, we got 80% accuracy. We had to get to 16 terabytes to actually get to the upper 90th percentile. And that's where you want your ML to be. It's not so simple, right? It takes a long time to train. And then the Achilles heel is always, well, we've integrated these things. Now I can't change any of them, because one small change in one system now ripples across all of them. If your customer, so your product management, product catalog for your print, your web, and your online store, you change one new attribute, now that has to go into the message bus, everyone, and everybody has to be able to consume that new attribute. So people get them in place, but they're really afraid to change them because it's a lot of Java code and C code, and hopefully not much assembler, but it is there to actually make updates there. So it's great for system to system, and it's something we need. Chatbots need this capability, but the way we've done it is not as optimal as it could be.
Yeah, very much agreed. It is good though that integration between systems and API based access to systems is pretty much you can pretty much expect that of any system these days, even those that some people would say don't have an API and you have to screen scrape them. It's not that they don't have an API, it's that it's not expedient to get to that API because of your toolkit or your access level. So these days, getting to systems through integration is not the problem. There are other challenges, but it's important to know that we can actually access these systems through their APIs in almost every case.
So John, if we talk about what we've done with communication between people, email, Teams, then chatbots, they do some great things. They start to get empathy for people. They can determine sentiment. They can reply back, and with limited learning. And then we know we've put APIs in front of everything out there. Sometimes we're afraid to change them. So where does that put us with the sweet spot for conversational API? Like that whole thing of, can we orchestrate people and systems?
Right. Well, it turns out, and if you look at the way you've laid it out, Chris, the challenge is that there's a set of tools we use to integrate people. We call those collaboration tools now, right? That is Slack and Microsoft stuff. And then we have various enterprise automation tools like EAI things, like RPA solutions, et cetera, that they're two very different camps. And there's very crude capabilities to get to the other camp. So you can do something like say, hi team, I'll be out for a family emergency. And maybe, hopefully, the rest of the team would see that. They might even be able to forward that message to other people who would need to know that. But that caused nothing in the HR system. It didn't do anything to the crisis management team. It didn't change the production output for that day or week that that particular person was working on, because those systems didn't see that message. There was no link to automation in saying that particular phrase. Or on the other side, right, where we've got the ability to build automation and integrate systems, but collaborating or integrating people fully into it is no more than an email and a link to yet another app, and whether they actually do that and do that in time and all of that. So we have crude capability of integrating the other side. So in our view, and Chris, you've laid it out quite well, these pieces all exist and they do their own camps well. But if we're going to get to real digital transformation, and which is what we think conversational AI can deliver, we've got to fully integrate people and systems under one umbrella. The end business goal, or that outcome you're trying to achieve, needs to be the seamless collaboration between people and systems. And that's what a solution has to sign up for. That's the fundamental premise behind why we built Krista and built it the way that we did.
Shift in thinking that actually you could communicate through a conversation with people and systems. But if we look to the future, how would we do that? There's different layers to help us with that, right? What would be in a simple conversation if we could do that?
Yeah, so this is really key. The way that the problem, and it's an understandable problem, since tech was so difficult to leverage and use and so expensive and took so long, those are old concepts. Tech now evolves very fast. We're at a breakneck speed of technology change. In fact, people are the bottleneck. We have to recognize that it's time for the tech to work the way that we do, not for us to figure out how to work the way that tech does. And that's another key ingredient that conversational AI today's sort of embraces, but really needs to fully embrace. And by that, we mean, if you can define a business outcome, or if you have a business outcome you want to achieve, I guarantee you could describe that outcome as a series of collaborations between people and systems. I ask this system to do this, I ask this person to do that, I inform this person of this, I make decisions, etc. And you would be able to define any process or any business outcome you want to automate in a conversational fashion. What that allows us to do is drive computing from our way of thinking. That makes building and maintaining automation incredibly fast and efficient. It makes the technology conform to the way that we want to, and it allows us to get a zero friction adoption with our community of people. Instead of saying, hey, we got this new thing, we have this new capability in our IT systems, so here's yet another app to go sort out and learn, we aren't going to get there. Just a simple example, if the typical numbers, not from us, but from industry stats, the typical corporate desktop has 50 apps on it, and people are switching apps, alt tabbing, 1,100 times a day. That tells you right there, there's zero orchestration. There's almost zero process automation. What we've done is we've given a ton of capabilities to a bunch of individuals and said, you sort out how to make all this technology work end to end. You plug all the pieces in. You figure out what the step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is. And if it takes other people, you send them an email, or hopefully they'll read your Slack message. Completely ineffective automation and orchestration. But if you use conversation as the model, and you drive the end-to-end orchestration of people and systems with those conversations, you get a completely different outcome. People are invoked as they are needed. Systems are invoked as they are needed. People can instigate activities just by asking a simple question, not knowing what app to launch and what menu to navigate, etc. All of a sudden, the level of automation and the sophistication of that automation can rise dramatically, even while at the same time, we bring down complexity. And that's the magic that making tech understand people can give us. That's why we literally tagline the company. Our mission statement as a company: make technology that understands people, because that drives the thinking toward make us the center of the design, not a protocol, an EI, an integration strategy, a certain tool, or a certain scripting language or something like that. Describe your outcomes as conversations, and all of a sudden the effectivity goes way, way up.
You know, John, you said something there I haven't heard you say before, about invoking people and invoking systems. So we're talking about the collaboration platforms, and Chris, you were saying that the fire hose effect, there's just too many messages, and even the managers tell you, hey, don't pay attention, right? And then you're penalized if you're not online because people will spot that. But imagine, you know, if you had the fire hose of a system, imagine the architect that says, hey, for every question anywhere, we're going to hit your system, whether or not, you know, we need data from you or not. So I think that is, if you think about it that way, then it's completely ridiculous to be doing that.
Yeah, the whole abuse of collaboration platforms is unfortunate, because that level of noise is so ineffective for us. But yeah, but without a more elegant solution, what are you going to do? So think Krista instead. A conversation among people and systems of a new order arrives from a distributor. Well, the first thing that needs to happen is we need to go check to see that we have those products, we have them in stock. So we're going to ask our supply chain system, are those products available? Great. Okay, do we have sufficient credit with this customer, credit balance with this customer to fulfill this order? No, we don't. Okay, well, what's the business process? We ask an account executive, will you sign off on allowing this order to be processed? That's what we want. So Krista will reach out to that particular account executive, provide all the detail necessary, even enable sidebar conversations. Well, let me look at the payment history of this customer. Have they gone silent on us, or is it just a matter of there's a big order they haven't, you know, are they still within their reasonable payment terms, right? That's context from an accounts receivable system that account executive would have. And by the way, let's not give everybody in the organization access to the accounts receivable system, but let's give Krista access to it so that Krista can inform people of what they need to know in order to make their decision. So that's what I mean, by the way, Scott, when we invoke that person, we give that person what he or she needs to know, provide them with context where necessary, and then empower that person to make that decision. It's not a message sitting in a massive channel of, you know, or an email that they might look at and then go away back to their original task and forget to even respond to, right? Or click the link in and go hit the button in the website or whatever. So that's what we mean by integrating and orchestrating people and systems more effectively. Of course, I could describe the rest of that process, but you get it. Just describe your outcome as the seamless conversation among people and systems. And all of a sudden you realize that building an automation, even for something as sophisticated as processing an order, becomes a fairly simple thing to do. Now, of course, where the rubber meets the road is we have to make the systems conform to people. But that's a one-time engineering effort, guys. You build that connection within Krista's framework to that order management system, that AR system, and then countless automations are built and maintained very quickly and very easily. And by people who understand the process, not by writing it down and someone who doesn't understand what you wrote, trying to get it right, where you're in this infinite loop of, no, that's not it, right? Look, I've been a developer most of my career, and it's just, English is too ambiguous, right? So how can I possibly, anyway, long soapbox there about how requirements are so difficult to get right. But that's what we mean by conversation. It is our programming language. So where we say conversational AI is going is it's not just conversation so that you can act like you understand what a person is saying and give them a quick and dirty answer. We want conversation to be the programming language of computers. That's what Krista does. We want conversation to be the programming language that defines the process of how things operate, and that invokes people and systems as needed. That's where we want to go. That's where we go. right? That's the fundamental tech inside of Krista. We think that's how the industry needs to go. Chris, you're on mute, so I can start this one, but I'd rather you say it.
Yeah. So if we look at what would that conversation look like if you had to do something like we've seen with Jonathan? So the idea is he needs to start a conversation. It's sudden absence management. So it identifies, okay, this is your employee. It pulled that up. It should go look to his calendar and say, okay, what's on your calendar? I need to cancel my attendance to those meetings. It needs to set the out of office for me so people get that so they know I'm actually not available, so don't bug me. It should available the PTO hours and go put that onto his calendar that I need to take time off. Like I've got sick leave, book that in there so all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted right. Notify HR manager and IT delivery systems, I'm out. This is what the situation is. And then escalate any service ticket to the manager. Because the worst thing happens is you're out and you're like, oh, I've got all this work. But if you have the ability to actually handshake that to someone else while you're out, and so, escalate it to your manager and say ServiceNow or whatever you're using, and then let them redelegate out. So then you kind of clear your calendar, clear, what your tasks have to be done. So nothing gets dropped, right? So, and the idea is this is a conversation. You start the conversation, I'm out, this is unexpected. Krista then says, okay, let me talk to these systems and set you out of office, cancel your meetings, notify people that you won't be out in Teams, and then clear your, escalate all tickets so there's nothing in your queue so nothing gets dropped, and then let you know what's happened. So Krista replies back, Jonathan, your meeting tasks have been rescheduled or delegated. I've got notified HR that you have a sudden absence. HR will personally follow up with you, right? So it's how this is what we consider a conversation that Jonathan should be able to actually easily have to relieve all that stress he was talking about. There's personal stress and job stress on that beginning slide, right?
Yeah. And this is where we want it to be, right? I mean, the point that Scott started with, and I think this is our kind of our final point, is IT and we as technologists, we build so many great capabilities for the people that we serve, and that's great. But we're overwhelming them with complexity in the process, and we're making them slaves to that technology to try to figure out how to make their jobs effectively performed, given all of this tech that they have to deal with. Our job is not done until we have removed that complexity, made the technology essentially the slave to them, not the other way around. And what we think this form of conversational AI does is it puts the person back in a human capacity. It makes the technology think and act in humane ways, in human ways. And that gives us the ability to not be so subject to it as much as it is subject to us. And in the long run, that's the most effective way for us to integrate with computers. And that's why Star Trek was so phenomenally smart, because they actually realized all the way back then, if we're going to have really great human-computer interaction, the human's going to have to be the one that drives the design principle for that. The center of gravity for human-computer interaction is human communication. It's not learning a programming language, or I like the phrase citizen developer, but a lot of people what that basically means is teaching everybody how to be a programmer. Why would we do that when the computers get double their CPU capacity every 2 years? They triple their storage capacity every few years. Our algorithms and AI get smarter every 6 months or so. Why aren't we making the tech figure out how to communicate with us instead of turning us all into programmers of them? That's the mistake. The citizen developer should really be the citizen program, right? The citizen program. We're not going to try to coin a phrase right here and do a bad job of it, guys. But my point is, have the tech sign up for this and we become much more powerful together, right? Adoption rates go way up. It's easy to walk under the bridge of the Star Trek Enterprise, and as long as your voice has the authority to do it, you can cause anything to happen, right? Yeah. That's the cool thing. That's what we want. That's how we want to be working with tech, isn't it?
Yeah, that's how I want to work with tech.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the mission. That's where conversational AI has to go. We'd love to show you how far we have taken that already with Krista, and show you some examples of how that's the case.
Well, perfect. Thanks, John, and thanks, Chris. If anybody has a question, go ahead and type that in, and we'll get to you as soon as possible. But I have a question for you, John, as people type or not type. With the Star Trek example, it showed Captain Picard, and you said, as long as your voice has the authority to invoke that system, what would, if I'm if I'm an IT leader, CIO or CIO -1 or 2, and and I'm a Star Trek fan, where am I going to push back on that? It's going to say, oh, that's impossible. You couldn't possibly do that because of this or that reason. What would those reasons? How would you overcome that? It's too complex, or my people aren't smart enough, or how would you combat that?
I think this is interesting. Scott, I don't think that they'll say that it'll be that their people couldn't do it. I think they'll say the people totally would love this. They'll wonder if it's really possible, right? What the typical question we get when we show them a real demonstration of Krista is, wait a minute, can you really do that? Can you really do that in my environment? How long would it take to do that? Is another really good question, right? Because, okay, it can be done. I'm seeing a live demonstration, but how long would it take for you to make that real for me? The good news is a lot shorter than you think. Most automation projects are full software development lifecycle projects with like a dozen people on them for months, and they never leave the project because of all the maintenance issues with traditional automation tools, low codes and RPAs, et cetera. And not to pick on any of them, because they all have their capabilities and they're very useful in certain areas, but none of them have the ability to reach this type of end-to-end automation among people and systems. So the time frame is usually the pushback, Scott, and the answer is it's a lot faster than you'd imagine, because the one-time building of the connectivity, right? Integrating Krista with your backend systems. And we already do this with a bunch of, this, Scott. We already integrate with tons of off-the-shelf systems you probably already use as a customer. But you also have, admit it, we've all done it, built tons of proprietary stuff too. And of course, we don't have those connections built. So there's time for that. That's usually a weeks, not months activity. But once you do that, we're talking hours to build many of these. Look, Chris built a demonstration yesterday for a school district in minutes. We do these on demos real time, right? So once the connectivity is there, the actual automation and maintaining that automation is faster than you would imagine. And that's how we can break the backlog blues. The challenge that so many automation projects have is they have this huge backlog of business demand changes that are hard to get the time. It's hard to give the development team the time to actually get all that work done. Krista takes most of that away, because the person who wrote the requirement that goes into the backlog could have actually made the change in that same amount of time. So the time effort is usually the objection, and it's usually not an appropriate objection. There's actually a really good solution to that.
Okay, maybe just a lack of understanding. Thanks, John. Chris, any closing thoughts before we shut down today?
So I just noticed one question. Someone asked, like, well, how can the business person get to this API data if it's actually API data? And the key is we want to create requests for information in Krista. And in the back end, if that means we got a 1 API or 20 APIs to gather all the information, decode it. So users work with information. An information request is, give me the status of an opportunity in the CRM. Well, we know that the opportunity has a lookup to the sales guy's name. It's like ID 123 turns into Scott King. And then we know that the customer is 456, and that turns into Nuco. So what we've done is we've made it easy for people or business people to request information, and we handle the data munging in the background. So that's how we make that work. So it's not like that first slide where I say, here's the JSON object, hope you win. because you may need to make 6 more calls to give you all the information of a picture. So when we think of like, hey, I'm a customer, I need to understand my opportunity. It's not just the opportunity, it's actually going and looking at all the complex things around it and presenting it in one easy call, easy to consume.
Exactly. The point that Chris is making is, what would a human ask that system? Not what does the system's APIs provide?
Yeah.
What would a
Right
human
around.
ask the system? If you go in that direction and you build the connectivity, expose that connectivity to Krista from the human perspective onto the systems, then building automation on top of that solution becomes extremely fluid and something a process owner is capable of doing. So using industry jargon, conversations or automation, those are the same things in Krista. That is a no-code experience. And I don't mean no code as in it's actually programming, but we use icons on the screen. Man, we've seen so many low-code platforms that basically turn all the programming constructs into icons and they call it no code. Guys, okay, so I don't type it in, but I'm still writing the same code. I'm just dragging and drop it instead of typing it. That's not the same, and that's why we think the citizen developer phrase is sort of a misnomer. But if you do go the other way around, where you say, what does it mean to ask for the current status of an opportunity? Most people would have an understanding of what that means. We build that once, and then any automation that needs any access to opportunity status has that. No ease, no more challenging than literally asking Krista, can you give me the opportunity status? It's like, yes, I can. All I need is the name of the customer or the account or the whatever, and that's it. That becomes your so-called program. It's just a conversation, right?
Well, if it's if it's that easy, we should fix our supply and demand problem of developer talent, right? If everybody is citizen developer, like everyone needs more developers, so we need to make it easy for the capacity we have, right? And that's
right.
that's people like me, because I can ask systems all types of questions, but I'm not going to manipulate any APIs
Right.
without using a tool.
When you were saying, think about me as a CIO a few minutes ago, I was trying not to cringe. When you think about, that's a really good point though, Scott, that you point out. There's so many development people right now in IT and in the partners of IT that are doing redundant development work that is just creating more complexity for people to navigate. If we had those folks instead tasked with building out capabilities, modernizing systems, exposing those capabilities in a more appropriate way, like we do with Krista, reducing the amount of redundant web development or mobile app development or what have you, because Krista delivers to all of those platforms, then all of a sudden that frees up development talent to actually do these other newer, more compelling things. And if business people have more ability to do more automation construction themselves, even if it's guided by IT, we end up with a much better distribution of labor, and we'll never run out of things we want to automate. So as soon as we reduce the need for more developers on project A, we'll create project B. It's not like the business's desire for automation ever gets exhausted, right? I've said this 100 times in my career. IT can never keep up with the business's mouth, right? Because the business can always talk faster than anybody can code. So we'll always have the demand. The question is, how can we speed up our delivery? And this is a really good way to do that. So our hope is that by embracing this, we increase the business agility and the velocity.
Well, perfect. Well, thanks, John, and thanks, Chris, and thanks everybody for joining us. If you have any further questions, feel free to contact us on your platform of choice. Pretty much type in Kristasoft in Google, and you'll find us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and website. And thanks so much for joining us, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.